Game changers, game changers. Welcome back to another episode of at the Desk with Dr. KwA, the podcast where transformation begins with conversation. Today we're tackling a question that sits at the heart of every school experience, yet often goes unspoken. Whose job is it? Whose job is it to shape the culture of the school? Whose job is it to manage student behavior? And ultimately, whose job is it to influence how a school is perceived by its community? Too often, these responsibilities are assigned, shifted, or misunderstood, leading to frustration, inconsistency, and missed opportunities for growth. Joining me today is Dr. Jacinth Joyce, an educator, author, thought leader who has spent her career helping schools elevate educator capacity, strengthen instructional practice, and build thriving, equitable learning environments. Dr. Joyce brings a systems focused and culturally responsive lens to this work and a firm belief that educators, when empowered and supported, are the keys to transformation. Dr. Joyce, welcome to the desk.
Hey there. Welcome, Dr. Sante. It's a pleasure to be here. So good to see you.
Thank you for pulling up a seat at the desk. I'm so happy to have you here. Um, it's a powerful thing to have someone who enjoys the dynamic of engaging scholars on a positive and affirming level, right? So the question, go ahead.
Now listen, what I told you when you first gave me the invitation, I was like, listen, I'm pulling up to your desk without observation, without being summoned to the principal's office, without anything.
Ah.
I'll pull up to this desk, okay? So I to be here and engage in a conversation. And like I told you over the years, like now stepping out and having seen so many things, whether it be at another school, as an administrator, as a coach, at a state consultant, even going and working, I so value so much more like the principles and the teachings. But you know, when you're in a classroom, you knew you're green, you have one perspective and you're
Uh-huh.
like, no, this way. But then when you have a larger perspective and you see multiple things, you're like, oh, I understand. I would rather be respected than liked in leadership. And you taught me that.
Okay.
But anyway,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm glad whatever it is that I did that influenced some of the things you did is working out for you beautifully. And I've seen your work and I'm enjoying your growth and what you are bringing to the table in terms of helping practitioners enhance their craft.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so let's get to the heart of it. Whose
All right.
job is it anyway, right? Whose job is it? So let's take a look at this piece here that I oftentimes incorporated this piece into my teacher handbooks so that
Mhm.
practitioners can have the opportunity to really think about how they are part of the solution or they become part of the problem, right? And so this poem, whose job is it? I don't like reading to people, but I'm going to have to read it, right? This is a story about four people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was asked to do it. Everybody was sure somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. How do you see? Give me your thoughts on that piece.
Yeah. So I do remember seeing this in the handbook. And, you know, as a teacher, you see it like one way. You see it like, oh man, like another thing that we have to do, like
Mm,
collectively.
right.
Whose job is what I'm hearing from the poem is like collective effort, collective responsibility, collective accountability. But as a former English teacher, and so a woman that understands words, and now where I sit in regards to coaching and empowering teachers to know that like they are the answer and that they're the
Mm,
solution to a problem or dilemma that we find ourselves in the world, right?
okay.
This word, everybody and somebody, it hits different now. right? So
Mm.
you typically feel like, I am somebody, right? And when I read and when I look at that word somebody, it reminds me that, yeah, individually, we're all everybody, collective power. But then
Mm-hmm.
everybody is somebody. Everyone has a particular purpose. Everyone has a particular job to do, a particular calling. Everybody is somebody's answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody a solution to a problem or a dilemma. And so instead of shifting from everybody, somebody, anybody, nobody, if we stayed with everybody and somebody, then I believe that the job will get done because everybody would understand that I am somebody, like that I have a part to play in this collective work, in this collective purpose, in this collective empowerment, in this collective uplifting of communities, of schools, of societies, and essentially the world, right? And I think because I also have been guilty of standing in this anybody, nobody seat for too long when I was in the classroom because I
Mm-hmm.
was so on so many problems, this big like system, the system is broken, I can't fix it. I did not move into somebody until later on in my career. But when
Mm.
I into understanding that everybody and that I am somebody, I didn't focus on, oh, another thing we have to do. Like when I saw something that needed to be done, I am somebody for that job. Like I
Right.
am the solution. And so I think at the last line it says it ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done.
Mm.
Instead of blame shifting, we would take our perspective and our focus off of everybody and say, well, if I'm in the space, if I'm in the conversation, if those students are in my class, if I'm in the building under that particular administration, if I'm teaching that particular year, then I am somebody for that job. Like I am there for a particular reason. And I think things would get done, things,
Mm-hmm.
responsibility, empowerment, empowering students, empowering ourselves, like uplifting the climate would shift because we would realize that everybody in the space is somebody and we all have
Okay.
a job to play. So
Okay.
that's what I get now.
Look at the English teacher going all in depth about stuff. I ain't mad at you.
That professional development gave us really worked, huh?
So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
a good one.
so whose job is it? So I think you touched on a lot of it just based on that piece alone.
Yeah,
Shared versus siloed responsibility, right? We can look
yep,
at it from that lens. Systems versus individual, and we
yeah,
could look at it from a culture as an intentional versus accidental. And so
yes.
when we talk about this, one of the things that I find fascinating, I was recently covering the school, and
Mm,
you know, as I do, I don't like sitting in the office and twirling my
yep,
thumb or just focus on the paperwork alone. I love being visible, and so
yes,
my visibility in this building, in this hallway, you know, the adults who were there. Again, I'm a visitor. I'm only here for
yeah,
my retired window of I'm gonna just get a flavor, and then I is
yep.
gone. So when the adults are like coming around going, "Oh wow, you're doing great," and in my head I'm going, "I'm doing great." Why? What makes it so? Or like, what's it that? What am I doing different that
Yep.
you guys feel the need to? I call it try to suit me up, right? Don't suit me up because I'm only here for borrowed time. But
Mm-hmm.
what is it that I'm doing? Here goes my thing again. What is
Mm-hmm.
it that I'm doing that
Yes.
makes you think that I'm doing so great, right? Because am I doing great because I'm doing that which you don't do? Am I
Yes.
doing great because somebody's finally doing what anybody could have been doing, right? So what is it that makes it
Right.
so great? And I thought it was real
Yeah.
interesting, people, you're doing great, you're championing me on because I'm visible in the hall. I'm talking to the kids that most of those adults ignore. Um, I'm pushing them out of the halls, and so folks seeing that they like that. But if we were all doing that, right? If everybody
Mhm.
was doing that, that hole will be clear quicker. And the crazy part is, you guys already have a relationship with these scholars that I do not have. Yet I
Mhm.
watch and I just, I'm in awe and amazement that we just let them basically do what they want. But this late in the year, trying to come in and pivot, that's a tall task.
You know what? And it's interesting that you say that because I sub in my free time and I've gone into buildings and I'm just simply taking attendance. And this one student that I remember was like, Miss Johnson, you're so nice to us. Like, are you going to be like our principal? And I'm like, what? And I'm just taking attendance. I'm just introducing myself. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
what makes you think that that I can be a principal? Well, you're just so nice to us. Like you pay attention to us.
Mm.
And sometimes I'm like wondering what that thing is. And I've gone into multiple spaces where students are able to pick up on something, whether it be a
Mm-hmm.
command, be the feeling that you give, whether it is eye contact, whether it is voice tone, whether it is energy, whatever it is. There's something that students can feel, and I not even students, but people we can feel. Like we both can probably agree that we've gone into spaces where we're like, it's tense, it's
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, shuts you down versus makes you feel free and open up. And then there's spaces that you go in and you are so full to be your full self because you feel that the environment is conducive, it's welcoming. And
Mm.
so with that comment that I've received that before, of course they don't really know my background because if I'm subbing, I'm
Mm.
subbing. It's Miss Johnson. Found out, then I'm like, what are you doing here? But and even in that itself, that question, like, what are you doing here subbing,
Right.
is a question that I've had to like wrestle with to say, but why should I not be here? That part about anybody, nobody, somebody, right? But if we're looking at you have a particular degree or you have a particular experience that somehow you can't come down to the lowest of lows in order to serve our students. That somehow, after you reach a point in your career, you're above subbing, you're above serving in without a particular title, right? So there is. I've come to learn that there's a perception. Society does it to teachers, but we also do it to our own within the system.
Absolutely.
The highest
Absolutely.
worth and value. But one thing that you said that I that kind of hit me was when that teacher says, "Oh my God, you're doing an amazing job," and kind of was like affirming you. But I've heard that before, and sometimes I think it's like a deflection. It is almost like a shift of the attention, like a saying, "You're doing an amazing job," but what the actual root of that is, I'm not doing what I'm doing, and so seeing you do it, you're challenging me to question, why am I mediocre? Why
Hmm.
am I big? Why
So
am
that
I status quo?
so that's an interesting lens to put on that, because the hope is that that is the thought process that should be going on, right? Okay, he's doing things that I wish we were all doing, but okay, I'm gonna give you your props, but are they really reflective? Because again, this profession requires
Yeah.
us to be reflective practitioners, right? So if we're being reflective, we see somebody coming in off the street, don't know these kids, and doing things that we, the adults in this space, should have been doing all along. My hope is that that's where the wow, you're doing a great job is going. But
Hmm.
if it's not going there, and we're going to hope come Monday you're there to do it again, y'all ain't gonna see me Monday, right?
Yeah.
and so who's going to step into that void, right? And so that I would love to be a fly on the wall to see if anybody
Hmm.
steps in the void come Monday
Yeah.
when I'm not in the space, right? But again, these are the dynamics. So interesting,
That's
interesting. The
no, and
the
it's good because not all educators are reflective, but I do think there's no coincidences in moments. So the fact that you're in a building at that time and that teacher crossed your path, and that teacher's noticing that you may be leading different from their particular leader, right? Whether they reflect on it or not, you planted a seed. Whether they're seeing something different that's either
mm,
challenging them, say, man, that is something different. That's something that I should aspire to. Now I have a choice. Now I've got to decide: do I want to reflect and grow, or do I want to remain
Mm-hmm.
the same? And it's their decision to make. And there's a consequence for both, whether you stay at comfort or you choose a discomfort of growth. And it's going to reflect, it's going to show up in how they lead, how they teach, their relationship with students, how their teaching experience is benefited, or it's going
Mm-hmm.
to suck, right? It falls on the onus falls on still the teacher to decide whether I'm going to be reflective or not. But I think them crossing paths with you, it's a moment where they have to decide: do they choose to let that
Mm.
be interesting, or that's something and it might that I now put in my toolbox because I really do desire to grow.
Mm. Um, I like the phrasing of that, and my hope is that is the desire to pivot from where their comfort level is. Right, that's the hope.
Okay.
Um, we
Yeah.
talk about climate, we talk about culture, and we use those two terms interchangeably all the time. Right, but I'm going to kill this phone.
I can tell you a
But
story.
how do you differentiate the two? Right, climate, culture. How do you differentiate the two?
Hmm. When I was in a classroom, I was so confused by both of these words. Okay, I didn't know the difference. I think they're very similar. One affects the other. I think it's kind of like a cause and effect thing. So when I think of, I'm gonna stick with climate first because I know that one well. Climate is like the climate. It's the feeling that you get from someone or somebody or some environment. So there
Mm-hmm.
is a temperature in my apartment right now. There is a climate that is set, right? And so there's a feeling you get. So it's how something feels or how a person makes you feel. And when it
Right.
comes to educators, there's a climate that we set all around us. I feel like there is a weather, there is a temperature. Now that is how we feel, but that feeling comes from certain things that we do or our belief systems that creates the culture. So from my understanding, culture is our values that we hold, our principles, certain things that we say, our routines, our rituals that ultimately creates this invisible feeling when
Function.
you walk in space. Exactly.
Function. How
Yes.
things function.
So the things that we do that
Right.
create how we feel. There it is. Things that we do that create how we feel. And there's an amazing quote, but I'll share that in a bit. But that's my understanding of culture and climate. And I think I was really good with articulating the climate. This doesn't
Mm.
feel right. Why do I feel like that walking away from the conversation?
Right.
Why do I feel like this when I walk into someone's room? And then with growth, with time, with experience and education and training, I realized there's a certain set of principles and values and things that people hold that impacts the invisible atmosphere around us.
Hmm. So, can you have a
What you
positive
think?
climate without a strong culture? Do you believe you can have
No.
a positive climate without a strong culture?
No, I think it can exist for a moment, but when you think about sustainability and longevity, no, there's going to be
Mm.
holes if the foundation is not set. For example, a house, like you don't start building the walls, start putting in the windows, the doors without a strong foundation. I feel like the culture is a foundation of which you build your house, and the house is
Okay.
in
Okay.
the
And so and so I'm so when we hear practitioners with comments
yep,
like nothing happens to these kids, right? And we're going to talk about scholar behavior shortly, but nothing
yep,
happens with these kids, right? And so I think we'll use this to segue into that, right? Responsibility or reaction when it comes to scholar behavior. Again, whose job is it becomes very real, right? It becomes
yep,
very, very real. And so, where does responsibility begin and where is it often misplaced, right? And so, I hear comments like, don't nothing happen to these kids. And the question always, whenever I hear an adult say that,
mhm,
I think nothing that they expect to happen to the kid
Yeah.
happens. And so because their expectation meets a
Mm.
divergent outcome,
Yeah.
that becomes their narrative, and they just get in their feelings about it and roll with it, right? So a kid cussing in the hallway or cussing talking to his or her friend, his or her peers is
Mm.
one thing versus a kid cussing at you, you mother, blah, 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 or whatever, however they go about it. So
Yeah.
those are two different elements, right?
Mhm.
So do we throw the book or the baby out with the bathwater? In both
Mm.
cases, do we move incrementally in terms of whatever the sanction might be?
Mhm.
When we look at it from that spectrum or that lens, right? The question, as I'm saying, where does responsibility begin? Where does it end? Or where is it misplaced? Because a kid cussing in the hallway, they could walk by 10 teachers. One teacher would be
Yeah.
like, just kids being kids. Another teacher will clutch their pearls and, oh
Yeah.
my God, that kid needs to be put out of this school.
Yeah.
And then another is like, eh, whatever,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Where does the
Hmm.
responsibility begin, right? Where do you see it from your lens, from your experience, having been a practitioner in the classroom, having been
Yeah.
a supervisor outside the classroom, having been now somebody who's helping guide and help leaders and practitioners alike
Yeah.
enhance their practice? Where does this fall?
You know, it's interesting when I was in the classroom and you always say practitioner, I always wondered. It sounded like a medical term.
You
And
always said
and
that. I chuckle every time you say it too.
and the more I learn and the more I see, it makes so much sense because there's something real about educational malpractice
Ooh,
where
you
we
going
can,
way back in my archives, huh?
right, you taught me something. And you would always mention that, like, these are our clients, our most valuable clients, these parents' most valuable commodity. And without them, we don't have a job. And so we are professionals practicing, and our clients we are supposed to be serving. Now, I think it sometimes gets twisted where we believe that the students should serve us. Like leadership, servant leadership is downward, right? Where
Mm,
the building leaders serve the teachers so that the teachers can better serve the students, and our students will better serve their community. But oftentimes we're like, students needs to listen to me, do what I say because I'm the authority in the room, power versus influence. And so sometimes we mix that up. So when you ask that question in regards to, like, some people feeling that one consequence is more lenient than the others, you know, in the classroom, again, I would go back to say I was very immature in my understanding, right? But
mm-hmm.
I think now, if you, like, as professionals, if you work in corporate, I'm not sure when we work in like the business of like service, social service, or people services, I think we kind of forget this, but corporate is very serious and strict about this. Like
Mm,
once you come into work in their organization, you adapt and you move with the values of the organization and the company. And
exactly.
so I think to answer your question, I think first we have to consider what are the values and the principles, the structure, the foundation and the structure, the walls, the beams of the house, the building that you work for, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the core of it. And I think once you really understand the values, you've got to kind of sometimes put your personal thoughts, agreements, values, perspectives to the side, not disconnect or disassociate from them, but if we have a building initiative or building agreement that no profanity, that all teachers are proverbially standing outside their door to welcome every student during
Ah,
session, then I might not find the need for that. But if that's the value of the building, I need to uphold that. Why? Because there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason behind it. So it shows through what sometimes that teacher values personally. If one teacher is constantly policing language and another teacher is like, yeah, whatever, I cuss whatever after work. So it is what it is. That language doesn't bother me. But
Mm-hmm.
again, you got to remember the structure, the foundation of the building, the house, and the company that you work for.
Right.
Agree or not, you said yes to that particular value. Now, some people may argue, I'm stuck. I try to leave, I can't, and yet still there is an integrity that you uphold. So then there's a lack of integrity, and I've been there before where I've tried to put my personal opinion before the collective, everybody, right, in the community. And so I think I've learned it's not fair to expect that a building leader would move a particular way that I don't have full scope and understanding about. If I think about myself in the classroom, I don't handle every student the same way. Yeah, there are
Exactly.
consequences, but I come to know the students, the clients that I work for. And maybe Jay can handle a phone call home, but maybe David needs some time with me detention just to talk with him and understand the family dynamic. Or maybe Asante he needs, so I think it's the vantage point that we see it. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you want it to be fixed. But I do believe that like we have to trust the leaders and the people that we work for to say, I may not agree with the way it was handled, but I respect them and I believe they handled it in the best way they knew how for that particular student. And I
Right.
think, yeah,
So I think you hit on a few things, and I think part of it is when we talk about management versus school systems. Some of the
yeah,
systems are put in place to help with the classroom management dynamics, right? Because
yeah,
if the kids aren't getting to your class on time, right, they'll get to Miss So and So's class on time, but your class, we take our time. So
yeah,
leadership decides, you know what? At the start of each or at the changing of each class, everybody in the
mhm,
hall help usher scholars out of the hall. Well, what does that do? It forces everybody to get into their give assigned spaces quicker, right? So that we can all start.
yeah,
Well, teacher A is consistent, teacher B is consistent. Teacher C,
mhm,
on the other hand, is like, yeah,
yeah,
whatever. I'm not even going to my
yeah,
door, right?
mhm,
And you see this play out with colleagues who
yeah,
um, won't say anything to their peer and say, hey,
yeah,
listen, we're all supposed to be in the hall. Why are you not there? Right? Each
mhm,
time you leave us hanging, that's one less voice we have to help
yeah,
redirect the behavior of the scholar, right?
yeah,
And so that's part of the challenge. And then
mhm,
consistency across adults, right? As you mentioned, yeah, I cuss all the
yeah,
time. So kid cussing, man, but the school
yeah,
policy isn't your personal policy, right? The building expectation isn't your personal expectation. You know,
mhm,
if we work in concert, we get to eliminate that behavior. If we work in concert, let's say no phones, period, or in the hallways. Well, if every adult says something when the kid walks by with the phone, the message to the child is that you're not supposed to
yeah,
have your phone. But if
yeah,
I can walk past 10 adults and nobody says anything, and they all see me
yeah,
with my phone, but they don't say anything, teacher number 11 is the one that gets the sauce, right? You always got
yeah,
something to say. Why you always got, ain't nobody else say nothing but you, right? And whenever
yeah,
a kid does that, I don't blame, I get the kid's disposition. Their
yeah,
response may be inappropriate, but you understand other adults that he or she may have walked by allowed and nobody said anything, whether they were because of they were operating from a position of fear of the scholar or whatever. The kid gets to go by. And so if I'm a kid and this happens daily, and number 11 is the only one who always has something to say, you know what they
yeah,
eventually do? They avoid going
yeah,
by number 11.
yeah,
They avoid going by number 11 because they get tired of hearing number 11, especially when they're consistent. So that's part of the dynamic in terms of
yeah.
creating this climate that we say we all want, or the culture that we say we want. The systems, the functions have to be consistent across all adults.
And I would say maybe it would be helpful because there are, now that I'm like 12 plus years in education, there were a lot of hills that I was like on the hill trying to die for, and they in the long scheme of things, they do not matter, right? And maybe it would be helpful for teachers, leaders, educators to understand and know the top 5 mountains that this building is going to die on. And
Okay.
that one is speaking with each other in a way of respect and
Mm-hmm.
understanding. Language matters because our language also creates our environment, right? And so I think sometimes there's so many, and to be fair, I'm thinking about from a perspective of a teacher who, if there are teachers listening to this, when I was a teacher, there were so many expectations. There's so many hills that
Mm.
were coming, not just within building, but district hills. Then because we were defensive status, state hills. And there's so many things that sometimes if you don't really know the top 5, as my old supervisor would say, buckets, your priorities, then
Mm.
sometimes like analysis paralysis or decision fatigue, and then you disassociate. So the things that would be of importance maybe to the climate and the culture, you're just like, oh, I can't take another
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
or they associate, or they don't say much, or they burn out, so they don't really have the capacity to do with yet another thing, right? So I can see on the side of the practitioner or the teacher saying, man, that's not a hill I want to die on Monday because I'm just trying
Right.
to make it. So
I get it.
I
I
think
get it.
it
I
could be
get it.
helpful. I think it could be helpful because both are true, both are necessary. I think it could be helpful for leaders to be able to articulate or prioritize. These are our 5 hills. These are absolutes because we know that it creates a larger climate, and maybe that
Mm-hmm.
will be helpful, but that's not to say that every leader understands or is able to articulate the vision, right? We
Right.
can't assume every leader in position are effective or they have capacity. So that's like another story for another day. But I think, yeah, there were things that I died on and it burnt me out. And there's some things now that I'm looking in retrospect that it's like, oh yeah, this is that one thing that I can hit. I could have stayed
Right.
longer on. Kind of, yeah,
Okay. 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 So
yeah,
the key is making sure that the expectations of the building
yeah,
are aligned across all adult, right? But that's also a whole trick. It's a whole dog and pony show, right? Because I've been here 30 years and it ain't working when the last admin was here, blah blah. Right. So you have all of these
yeah,
variances that interfere with what needs to be done within the building.
yeah,
Game changers, I have to
yeah.
apologize. My camera is, I guess, extra hot, so it keeps blanketing me out. I was about to go south on my language, but yeah.
And that's okay. Every time it wears out, I'm like, oh, he's just camera shy. He's just taking a break
There
from
you
camera
go.
for
Everybody considered me being camera shy in the moment, and
and then
we
you
keep it moving.
take a picture, kind of have a blurred out image or a silhouette. So, but remember, in the meetings, you would always say, remember this get on the bus analogy?
Uh huh.
Okay, you always say you don't need everybody on the bus.
You
You
don't.
need you need
Majority
a few.
though.
Exactly, you need a majority on the bus. And I've learned that those who are kind of stuck in their ways, the formal leader may not get them on a bus. But over time, the hope
Mm-hmm.
is that from based on the colleagues that work so closely with them, it begins to kind of like rub off on them, like this new idea. Because past practice is always not best practice, and
Ooh,
so
PP all day, baby.
guys, I use
We've
that when I'm
always done it this way.
man, okay? People are so stuck in past practice, but change is so difficult. Change is
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. And so when you have that colleague who has more influence than maybe that particular formal leader, as long as they're on a bus, you hope that some of that would eventually rub off on
Not
them and kind
camera
of,
shy again. Come on.
there you go.
Ooh. Yeah, as
Say-
as as you sip your tea, right? As you sip your tea. So empowering teachers as culture drivers. Let's talk about that,
yeah,
right? So one of the things that you do, your work is centered on the belief that educators are the answer, right?
Yep.
And the reason why I call educators game changers is because that's my belief as well. Having been a classroom teacher, I know the impact I've had on my scholars. And I think
Yeah.
I try to bring elements of that into my leadership practice. But
Hmm.
what does it look like when teachers are truly empowered to shape the culture? How do you see that dynamic?
Hmm. Okay, so I'll share a quick story. So it was after my interview at Hubbard, and I
We
shared
try
with,
not to drop names, but I appreciate it. We keep it generic. We after it's okay. It's okay. I'm just busting your chops.
shout out to the Hub. So I'm
Hawks
here.
fly high,
No one
right? As we said, right? Hawks fly high.
but I remember after my interview, and I was really excited, only because it took me 4 attempts to pass my New Jersey practice test. I was certified in New York, took 3 exams over there, passed it with a breeze, but somehow transitioning out of state to get a new practice, it took me forever. So
Mm-hmm.
I already spent that hundreds of dollars, thousands of hours, driving miles, commuting, and money was already thin. And so I felt this sense of defeat, shame, went through depression, was really sad, thinking maybe I'm not smart enough to even be a teacher because I can't
Mm.
even pass my own exam. So then how then do I assess my future students? So I already had this climate, this feeling around me that I'm walking into the classroom feeling less than, having coming from a place of deficit, right? So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, long story short, I was able to get my practice exam. I passed it, and I didn't pass it. They gave me a waiver because I was certified out of state, and then my master's GPA. So I was actually 4 points over, right? So that's even God in itself. But I remember I called a family friend who was super excited for me, well intended, but said something in the wrong moment,
Mm.
and shared with them. I landed my first job. I had applied to 30 jobs. Nobody called me back, but I attend this event and then I meet my future principal. So I'm sharing the interview went well. I was like, oh my God, I don't know about balanced literacy, but I try to do my job. I kind of said what I say. And then I was excited. And what this person said was, well, I live a town over from that district. You're going to work in that district
Mm.
at that school with those students. There's a reputation. And so here am I, finally have arrived. I'm so excited. And again, on my shoulders, the back end is defeat, is depression, is shame, is rejection from my attempts for my test. And in this one moment, there now was a perception that this person had about the same district that I was so excited that God had kind of allowed me to have this dream job.
Mm.
So I say all that to say now the first day I'm walking in before I meet with my students, in the back of my mind is, oh, these students are less than.
Mm.
Like
Mm.
I'm also feeling less than. This district is less than. The
Mm-hmm.
school is less than, right? And so I say all that to say because I do believe teachers, educational leaders, support staff sometimes enter the profession with not the best perception of their building that they're working in, the students that they're about to serve, the colleagues that they're about to partner in, even the highest perception of who they are as game changers, as even the answer. But it was in my first couple months of teaching, this one student said something with me, and we're still close to this day. She said, Miss Johnson, you're real irritable. Did you get enough sleep last night? And check. And she repeated it again, nice and loud too. Kids were working on their do now. And I went to the back, and in that moment, I had to reflect on what she was saying. She literally used her words to say, yo, you're different, Miss Johnson.
Mm.
But different had experienced something better before. So it checked me because I'm saying, whoa, like a student, seventh grader checking me. I'm an adult. But also, I was embarrassed that she felt something. There was a climate, a temperature around me that wasn't as positive. And I prided myself
Mm.
on body embracing everyone, a sense of belonging. But it was that very moment, my fourth month of teaching, that I realized that I can be crossing on my T's, dotting my professional I's, but yet my most valuable clients, my students, can be feeling something different. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you ask that question in regards to whose job is it in regards to climate and culture and setting that environment, I do believe if I was not able to like self-reflect, if I didn't begin my journey for therapy, and everyone doesn't believe in therapy, but I do believe in healthy accountability around you,
Mm-hmm.
mentorship, coaching that can kind of see your blind spots. I had a lot of blind spots based on how I walked in, but based on what people were telling me about the school that I was going to work in, or students, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, student had to confront me to check what was going on or where I was about to go. And so, I think if I didn't have a healthy relationship with my seventh graders and eighth graders and sixth graders and ninth graders who always didn't say the thing the right way, but the
Mm-hmm.
minded was coming from a pure place, then I think I would have derailed my whole professional career. And so
Mm.
I think a part of it is not devaluing someone because they're younger than you. I do believe respecting everyone appropriately. And
Mm-hmm.
I realize my students have helped me to grow in a tremendous way that I wouldn't have grown if I didn't have a relationship where I honored their voice above my position.
Okay.
And yeah, so I forgot the original question. I was going somewhere with that. I was
You were on the road. I let you ride. So the question was, what does it look like when practitioners are truly empowered to shape culture?
okay, so yes, here it is. I feel like before I was empowered to shape culture and climate, my students had to empower and shape me to create the culture and the climate within the classroom.
Okay.
One happened before the other, because they were my check, they were my measure, they were the honest truth that sometimes I confront in front of my colleagues or meetings, but when I close that classroom door, they're brutally honest with me. You
Okay.
know, they my overall assessment. And so I think sometimes feeling chipped away at, or sometimes feeling not the greatest, that I'm doing the greatest job, helped me to kind of take a step back to say, okay, what's going on here? And then I was able to decide, okay, do I take this information to help me grow and empower me? Or I take it to kind of say, well, you know what? I'm the adult in the room. I've got this power, so I don't have to listen to what anyone has to say. That makes sense.
That makes sense, and that's you're confining it to the instructional setting. With it, when we talk about the classroom, how does that play out
Yeah.
in the building with leadership and with colleagues? How do you see teacher empowerment within the culture and the climate of the well, really within the culture of the school setting? Um,
Yeah.
any thoughts on that? I have my own, but I want to see what you pull out the bag.
Yeah. I think there are leaders. One of my brothers in this work, he talks about leadership from every seat. And I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes we're waiting for a formal leadership title in order to feel like we can lead. But again, going back to that poem, whose job is it? Everybody is
Mm.
somebody. And so, whether there is a particular team, a particular role you can play, I think there's one, if I can say one of the many good things I would say that I learned from your leadership is I never felt like you muzzled my voice in the classroom. You
Okay.
knew that I was there. I was a bit green. You know, I had so many ideas, and you had to be like, okay, kid dynamite, like let's but I didn't feel like you muzzled my ideas. If I presented an idea for you, you listened, you heard it out, and then it might have needed a little bit like of tweaking. But I think that helps with the empowerment, feeling
Mm-hmm.
heard by your leader, or feeling heard by your colleague, or a sense of belonging. There were so many activities, so many things to do, so many teams to join, that I feel like that increases a sense of belonging when you feel like this is my community too. Not I'm just walking in at 8 and leaving at 3 or 4, and then I'm driving 45 minutes to an hour away where I live, but I don't feel a part. So I think that sense of belonging in a community helps colleagues to feel empowered to
Mm-hmm.
make a change and make a difference. So I think it is feeling that you're valuable enough with the
Mm-hmm.
ability that you with, feeling heard by your leaders and colleagues, but also feeling a sense of respect that I may be different from everyone else. I may have my experiences, my backgrounds, my deficits, but
Mm-hmm.
those also value to the balance of the environment that we're all trying to shape. And yeah,
Okay. So teacher voice,
okay,
professional autonomy, support
okay,
versus overload, right? I
yeah,
think one of the things that practitioners oftentimes don't see or appreciate is leaders minimizing the weight of all that needs to be done. Right? They
yes,
don't, I don't think enough people have an appreciation for that, because there have been times where I'm being given the charge and I'm going, yeah, we're not doing that to my folks, right? But that means that's
yes,
something I have to deal with once I leave. When my supervisors show up, I have to answer to that, right? And
yes,
so it's like, okay, I'm not doing that to my people. It's 5
mhm,
items. I'm gonna give them 2 for now, and we'll build in the
yes,
rest over time. I don't think people
yes,
appreciated that, but I think what gets in the way of teachers feeling ownership over the culture,
mhm.
in my estimation, is people getting in their feelings when they don't get what they want, right?
You would always say that.
Uh, People get in their feelings when they don't get what they want, and that's that privileged dynamic that people bring with them, that sense of entitlement. And
Yeah.
I think this kid should be suspended, and you only gave him detention, or you only talked to him, or, right? When we get into those, those things, because it's difficult for me to rationalize or wrap my head around some of the behavior
Mhm.
that I received as a leader, in response to my disposition about how things will be done. Because
Yes.
everybody had their own ideas. But if we all coming from different places, we're not rolling this boat in the same direction. So anyway, I think one of the things that adults need to really begin to understand, if you're working with a leader that allows you voice,
Yeah.
that gives you some professional autonomy in most areas, right? Supports you and doesn't overload you with what needs to be done. Because trust and believe, all of us are burdened with weight, right? The
Yes.
question is, am I going to just drop it on your lap and be like, handle it? Or am I going to kind of ease it into the equation in a way that kind of helps the digestion of it be manageable, right? So those are just elements that I think really help
And
practitioners.
and I wanted to say one thing. I think sometimes we as adults, and I'm included, forget the amount of grace that we've been given when we are in the teaching, leading, working practitioner space. That we
Mm-hmm.
want these hard concepts for students because again, sometimes
Oh, you
we're
about to
just
touch the
humans. We
third rail. I love it. Go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I think guilty of it. I think we are. I think this is a human condition. This is a human problem. We're so easy to forget how much
Mm,
grace that we've been, patience that we've been given, warnings that we've been given, consequences that should have been ours but not given, leniency that we've been given, forgiveness that we've been given, that sometimes we want others to withhold that same grace that we've received. Because
mm,
again, we're looking at from vantage point, or again, because we're the adult and they're the child, so they should learn. But yeah, if
mm.
we're honest, we're all still learning. We all make mistakes. Like we all screw up.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I know you got my file. Okay, you was listen. You were there. in 2012. So I was in this process of learning and growing. And so I think sometimes because we easy to forget and we
Right.
want people to pay, we want to see people pay for consequences. That's a human. We want people to pay for what they did that was wrong. But then I
Mm-hmm.
think understand this level of belonging, restorative practice. We want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure community remains restored and people understand why. So no
Mm.
longer zero tolerance, no longer slap on the wrist, and I don't tell you why. But I think there's a trend, gentle parenting, and some there's a it's so like it's a polarizing conversation, gentle parenting or not. And I don't know
Right.
where I fall on that. There are times where you have to lean into one more than the other. There's never
Okay.
wrong, there's never right. It is
Right.
a decision that you choose. And so when I say all that to kind of affirm that I think we have a problem with looking outside of ourselves to make sure that somebody else paid for their mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And we sometimes internally look at the many mistakes that we've made, but who was there, who was patient with us, right,
Right.
along that process. And
And I think
we
that's
would
a
just
great
be,
point. A great that's a
yeah,
great point you're making, and I think most often practitioners that you hear making the comment, nothing happens to these kids, right? They are more about the punitive over the
yeah,
restorative, right? Because if
yeah,
you understand that you're dealing with one children, I don't care how tall and
yeah,
how big they are, they're still children, right? And we also have to understand the demographic of scholars that we're working with and the stuff they
hmm,
come with. So
yes,
while we oftentimes are the targets of their air,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
We're really just we're not necessarily they in their heads. Right now you're the person right in front of me, so you're the person I can lash out at.
hmm,
um, and I think oftentimes we miss that human element. The fact that hey, this kid did not get any sleep. Like we don't
no,
take any of those elements into consideration, right? Yet when it's us on the acting out or
hmm,
misbehaving, right? And you've heard me
yeah,
say we're no different than the scholars, right? And I've had adults get turn their nose up, and I'm going because you guys do stupid things that like come on, man. How many times I gotta tell y'all about X, Y, and Z, right? And
yeah,
but you want me to give you grace. You want me to allow you to, you know, give you a second chance. But when it comes to somebody
mhm,
else, you want me to bring the hammer. And it's like, y'all can't get it. It got to cut both ways. But no, I think
mhm,
that's an element that all of us need to have an ongoing conversation around to make sure that we are more understanding of the scholars that we're dealing with. Just as you want your admin to be graceful with
understanding of
you,
this.
right? But that's a very interesting piece. I want to kind of move us on because we're hitting that. Go ahead.
I know. I want to close this off, but I've been in the therapist seat for a long time, right? More than a decade. And I realized that when I healed my little girl, we all have like a little girl, a little boy within us, that
Mm-hmm.
little child that needs to be nurtured. But the more I healed her, the less I took my students' ill behavior and misconduct personally.
Mm.
And when I'm doing trainings with my teachers and clients, I remember I shared a very confronting situation that I had with one of my students in eighth grade. And I was like, I was triggered. I didn't know that. I didn't know the language. Yeah, when I took that student's pen and
I
she called me out
remember.
my name,
I remember.
okay, you knew this is who I said it. And I was like, but why was it? Why did that happen that way? And a teacher said to me in the my feedback form, and a principal came to me and said, my teachers are coming to me talking about triggers. And they're responding differently. They didn't
Mm.
know that's what it was. They didn't have language. And so I
Mm.
think some of the get them, you should, it's because maybe our little boy, our little girl, our little child maybe wasn't giving grace to us. And so
Mm.
we want it so have someone to pay. But when we reflect and when we see it like as a mirror, we want the grace to be given to them that maybe wasn't given to us, right? And so I think I've learned that we can sometimes focus on other people's behavior,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we really reflect on how we want our little child to be nurtured, or maybe grace to be given unto us. We're mirrors or windows in our classroom. A student's misconduct is either a mirror for us to look at ourselves, or a window. We're looking out at maybe understanding trauma or what our students go through, or maybe what they're navigating, that we can come into a place of
But
understanding. So that's how I learned.
Don't nobody got time for that. Those kids know they need to come in
Okay,
here, right? They can't come in here with all that foolishness.
well,
You come on now,
no,
Doc. You know for a fact. Don't nobody got time for. I got too much to do for these kids to be coming in here acting like they lost their damn mind,
okay. And I'll tell
right?
you, and I'll tell you this: they'll make your life, they will make your teaching career hell. Excuse my language. If you don't prioritize their relationship and understanding them, and because
Mm.
we're in a seat of influence, we have the responsibility and job to get to know the most valuable clients that we serve. You don't like it, whether it's 20, I'm a sub for fifth grade students, and they've worked me out until I was able to work them out, right? Whether it's middle school or high school, literally,
Yeah,
you
Doc,
have to
you
really
say all that stuff, but whatever. I mean, that's leadership's responsibility. That ain't my job. I don't get paid for all this
okay,
madness. I don't need this stress on my hand.
okay, and
These
they will
kids and
work
their
you out.
damn
They will,
parents better, blah, 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 right? And so you get all of this. So it can be very saucy. It can be very saucy. I want to share
oh,
another element that I share with staff routinely as part of our learning community to kind of get them
mhm,
thinking about just how this conversation we're having about the climate and culture of the school isn't the sole responsibility of just leadership or leadership and security or somebody else, but not mine, right? And so that's something that I want to kind of so let me share this with our audience, you and our audience equally, and then we'll kind of run through this real quick to kind of bring it to a close. So I see we're approaching
yeah,
that 60-minute mark. But
okay,
am I a builder or am I a wrecker? Right?
hmm,
I passed one day through a lonely town and saw some man tearing the building down. With a heave and a hoe and a husky yell, they swung a beam and the sidewall fell. I asked the foreman, "Are these men skilled? The type you would hire if you had to build?" "Oh no," he chuckled. "Oh no, indeed. The common laborer is all I need. Why, I can destroy in a day or two what builders have taken weeks to do." I thought to myself as I walked away, which of these roles have I tried to play? Am I a builder who works with care, making his tools a ruler and a square, shaping my peers to a well made plan, helping them be the best they can? Or am I a wrecker who walks around content with the labor of tearing down? And I use this and I always share this with staff because if you think the narrative out there about our school is the sole responsibility of leadership, you are mistaken. If you think the climate and culture of this place that we all want to be and we all have to be Monday through Friday is the sole responsibility of leadership, I think you're mistaken. Because what role do you play, right? Are you the one going around making the noise about, oh, don't that happen to these kids? Oh, leadership sucks. This is it, right? Those teachers are this. Because as you are saying it, you are helping with the perception and the narrative that people have of where we all work, right? And so it's one of those things that I, you know, in my role as a leader, in my role as a consultant, working with leadership as well as teachers, I try to get people to really think about, well, what's your role, right? I share with you being in a space where people are trying to applaud me because I'm visible and I'm talking to kids and I'm making sure that they're going where they need to go. And oh, you're doing great. And you said, well, my hope is that affords them or forces them to reflect on whether they're doing their part or not. But equally,
Yeah.
right? Um, what
Hmm.
role am I playing in the narrative that the school have? Because I had a officer talking about, don't nothing happen to these kids. Meanwhile, you're sitting there, it's about 15, 20 kids just milling around, not where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
But you on your phone and
Yeah.
you're telling me, and I'm going, so how do you help change that dynamic? I don't know. I
Hmm.
mean, because nothing happened to, and I'm going, wow, that's fascinating. Because if you were just doing your bit and got up and told the kids to move, yes, they'll move, they'll go somewhere else and they'll come back. But if you did your part, do you know how much
Yeah.
more powerful that would be? Because if you did your part on this side, your counterpart, your colleagues do their part when they end up in their zone. After a while, the message to the scholars is going to be, man, I'm gonna take my behind the class because everywhere I go, somebody's telling me to get out of their hall or move out of the way. Right, get to class, get to class. If that's a message I'm hearing from everywhere I go, guess what I'll
Hmm.
do? Eventually, I'm going to go to class. But if nobody's saying anything, well, heck, I'll stick around here. Hell, you see me and you on your phone and you ain't even talking to me. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm good.
And and from this poem, just kind of what comes to mind, I think I always think about the clients first, our students. Like this,
Mm-hmm.
the line that says, am I a builder who works with care? Right? And people who are builders or are experts or knowledgeable, I don't even like that word expert because there's no perfection, but like knowledgeable in their
Mm-hmm.
field.
Mm-hmm.
There's a time taken, there is a care that they take because they want to hit the target, or they spent so much time with the work that they're doing that they want to make sure that they're working with a level of care, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think perhaps it could be what's happening in society, it could be what's happening in our own personal lives, it could be what's happening in the educational system. I think we moved away from building with care
Mm.
to checking boxes to keeping the people, politicians, and people in higher power happy. That now we are not moving from a place of care and skill, but from
Mm-hmm.
just getting it done. And yes, we're everyone's navigating something, so that's not to negate the realities that we're all facing. I'm just looking at
Absolutely.
the say I'm convicted to even in my own space, in my own world, like, am I a builder that is still building with care? And then the line before it was, why, why can I wreck in 1 or 2 days what took weeks to
Why I can
build?
destroy in a day or two what builders have taken weeks to do.
And I am thinking about the weeks, and when we look at weeks, it could be times, it could be months, it could be years, but I'm thinking of students and parents. I'm thinking of students who've navigated so much trauma, so much
Mm-hmm.
pain, silently and collectively, generational trauma, whatever trauma, but they've endured pain that when they show up to our classrooms, they've had to navigate some things in order to make it to our front door.
Mm-hmm.
It weeks, it took them months, it took them their family sometimes years to build. I have a student who just moved from another state down south to come up north because the family was fleeing abusive family situation. It
Right.
took them weeks to build, right? It took them weeks to rebuild a sense of self-confidence, weeks to build a sense of belonging, weeks to gather the courage and confidence to learn a new teacher, learn a new space, learn new routines and rituals. And so when we consider that it took us all some time to get where we are, we would take more care in making sure that we continue to uplift and build in our
Mm-hmm.
lessons, words, in our interactions. And then our climate will be healthier because we all understand that we all navigated some things to get where we are and we all belong. And so that care
Absolutely.
keeps ringing and coming back to me is, do we care enough to build, or we're all stuck in our own stuff, our own pain, our own traumas, our own like
Well,
dislikes, disappointments, and fears.
so think about what you're saying, right? A child who's going through some abusive dynamics,
Yes.
right? Finding the
Yeah.
courage and the resiliency to make their way into your classroom.
Hmm.
And as I said, game changers, right? Game changer can wreck that in a heartbeat with a statement, with a comment,
Yes.
with a dismiss, right? So we have to be mindful, and again, as we're speaking here, it sounds like, oh, I will never tell anybody that I was the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? Only because I know there were, as a reflective practitioner, I also understand that, there were things that I could have done differently as a
Yeah.
leader that would have probably, you know, hopefully made things
Yeah.
easier or better for some people and other, some more than others, right? I'm very cognizant of that. So
Hmm.
my audience, game changers, don't think Asante ran, oh, it was a perfect no, no. I had
Yeah.
fights with everybody, right? But I fought in the interest of scholars. My
Ours.
whole thing was always about, listen, as long as I put my scholars above it, because listen, my disposition was, adults, you gotta come here, you gotta work, right?
Yeah.
15th and 30th, whether you lifted a finger or did not, you got a paycheck. So guess what? The fact that I'm here and I gotta deal with whatever comes down the pike on this, everybody around me needs to put forth their best effort. And so accountability for me was a thing that I held and not everybody likes that or
Yeah.
like that. But I also came from a place of, if where my son is, where my child is, I'm hoping that the leader of that school is doing everything humanly possible to make sure that the adults there are doing the full
Yeah.
yeoman's job of making sure that my son gets the best possible education with whatever
Yeah.
is available, right? And so that's the thought process behind how I function and operated. It wasn't sexy. Not everybody liked it, and frankly, I'm not for everyone, but it is what it is. It is what it is, right?
And you
But
said
I say all of that to say that, like the leadership's role in narrative and perception is tied to practitioners' role in the narrative and perception of where we all come and where we all converge on a daily basis to make
yeah.
this work for all of us, right? So
Hmm.
there's always that internal culture and external reputation, right? What's
Yeah.
really happening there? I remember, uh, Hubbard has been getting some serious beatdown. I'm like, we're not the same school that we had been, right? So
Yeah.
there's a legacy narrative
Yeah.
where the east end of the school on the east end, closer to the affluent folks, always
Hmm.
gives this, oh, the kids over there aren't like y'all on the west end. But I'm like, well, you have, first of all, I worked in both buildings as
Yeah.
a teacher and as an admin. So I know different,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
people who've never stepped foot in there or only go by what they hear
Yeah.
walk into our building and go, oh, snap. Oh,
Hmm.
this is different for what, uh, oh, you guys, right? And so I remember we had a evening under the stars, I think it was called. And the mayor and one of his aides came through, and the aide was shocked.
Hmm.
Oh my God. Now, this is a community member. This is somebody
Hmm.
who ended, took sat in the seat as
Yeah.
at later on, and
Yeah.
your reaction is, "Oh my God!" But I'm certain you have been thinking of us as the school of
Hmm.
old, right? The narrative, but that's the problem. Until people actually venture in and see what's happening and see that, wait, our kids are not running amok.
Exactly.
The it, it changes the conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
consistency of experience, communication, and transparency. I think sometimes I was a little too transparent because I wore my heart on my sleeve, right? And so every now and then I'll let my emotions get the best of me, and I'll put stuff on Front Street
Hmm.
and keep it moving. But anyway, all that aside, I think it's critically important that both leaders and practitioners, as well as our
Yeah.
scholars, we all play a role in how our school is perceived. I'll give you the last
Yeah.
word on that before we go into system thinking and accountability.
No, that's just really good because you touched on like perception. And to be fair, we all have biases. We all lean into what we hear, but we just shouldn't stay there. Like we have to be courageous enough, brave enough, and find the work important enough to move beyond our perceptions to really engage so that we can shift the narrative. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there's so many people who are outside of education, whether it be politicians, whether it be some parents, community members, educators, students, whoever it is, everybody, individuals who remain stuck in the last thing they heard about educators, the last thing they
Mm.
heard about the K, the last thing they heard about those students, the last thing they heard about that school or that district.
Right.
And then they never become somebody who are the game changers, who are the answers, the solution to a problem or a dilemma, because they remain stuck in the everybody box, right? And I think, as you mentioned, we're not perfect educators, but I think we've gone through a number of experiences to be able to go back. Hindsight is 2020, and to reflect and to be able to share from a place of hope, not from a place of
Mm-hmm.
perfection. And I've made so many mistakes, but one thing I still do, even when I do sub, is to apologize publicly or to a student, and literally a simple apologize restores a mistake, or they really see, oh, Miss Johnson's human. Like, oh, Dr. Kwame is he's human. Like, just apologize. We're gonna
Mm.
make mistakes. We're gonna lead with emotions some days, but I think it's how you respond after an
Right.
incident has occurred that really showcases and exposes your character. So that's it.
Okay, so let's move this along because we are chopping it up and dragging and just going on and on. No, I'm just kidding. But we are, the conversation. The conversation. I'm loving the conversation. Trust and believe. And my hope is that our
Okay,
audience.
I'm
Good.
having
I'm
fun.
glad you're
Okay, you
having
know
fun.
why? It's not your principal's office. I don't have to sign anything. I don't have to reflect. I don't have to say how would I teach this lesson differently if I taught it again. I don't have to do any of that. I could just
Ah. For
just
our
messy.
audience,
Just
if you didn't know already, JJ, as I call her, kid Dynamite, and she didn't even know who that was. And some of you probably still don't know who that was, but just Google "good time," right? Was a former practitioner under my leadership once upon a time. But as we go into this final segment, if we're being honest, sometimes the answer to whose job is it becomes everybody's job, right? And then no one takes ownership. So how do schools avoid that trap, right? From your working with different schools and being in different schools and having gone through the system yourself, what can you say to help schools avoid that trap where whose job is it? We know it's everybody's job, but then no one takes ownership. What would you advise, or what would you say to leaders and practitioners alike, what they need to do to
Yeah,
avoid that trap?
I think we get trapped when we're looking at what everyone else is doing or everyone else
Mm,
is not doing. We don't focus on self. And so, like I say to my students now, here's your business, here's my business. You
hmm,
stay over here, and I'll stay over there. And it's just so revealing. We can easily pinpoint what someone else is not doing, but
mm-hmm.
sometimes it's hard for us to maybe what we're doing or not doing that's contributing to the problem. So I think in order to get unstuck, if you are stuck, is to increase the reflection on self. And if you are not great at reflecting, have honest people around you to help you reflect so that
Absolutely.
you move everybody to becoming somebody that focuses on the collective vision. So it is focus on self and focus on collective vision. Once you do that, if somebody drops the ball, you don't be like, whoop, that ball dropped. That's not my job. It is, do I have capacity to pick up this ball and keep running? Because we got this collective vision. And I think that's how leaders in schools can not fall into the trap of being stuck or can get unstuck is a focus on self, healthy reflection, not too much ego or egocentric self,
Mm-hmm.
but then also what is identify the collective vision and work towards that collective vision.
Okay. Okay. I like that. So clear roles, collective
Yes.
accountability, right? And of
Yep.
course, we always want to make sure that is aligned, the systems are aligned. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into our final phase, final phase, right? I have three
Let's go.
queries for you. Leadership question for
Okay.
you. All right. What leadership move most impacts school culture? What leadership move most impacts school culture?
Leadership move that most impact school culture. I think, hmm, this quote by Wilkinson Jr. Can't remember his first name now, but it says, if you're too big to serve, you're too small to lead.
Mm, okay.
If you're big to serve, you're too small to lead. And I think the leadership move would be servant leadership, service of others. And
Okay.
I think when you begin to serve others from an honest place, then I think that culture shift happens because now you are aware that how I serve others, it's reciprocated, then others in turn will turn to serve me. And it's now a dance of who can outserve someone, and there you have the culture shifting. So I think the move that a leader can make is to focus on serving others,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think it would change perspective, the language they use, the choices and decisions that they make because they have others in mind versus outside of self.
Okay. Okay. Here's my education question for you. What is one shift schools must make to improve climate? So we talk about culture, we talked about climate, right? Climate is the vibe, the feel, right? What is one shift schools must make to improve climate?
Um, I don't think it's one move, but I think it could be a mindset perspective shift. So I think I'm coming from the study of Dr. Tara Yasso. She has the community culture wealth framework, and this was a study done with Chicano youth. But essentially, there is six pillars of community wealth, where you look at students or people from an asset perspective versus a
Mm-hmm.
deficit perspective. So with linguistic capital, there's capital in language, in the way you speak, your cadence. There's capital in family, your family circle. There's capital, their values, their shared. So she goes through navigational, social capital, all the things, aspirational capital for
Mm-hmm.
students of color who were kind of or misrepresented or marginalized. So I would say the move to shift the climate would be shifting, it's a paradigm shift of seeing yourself as the
Okay.
educator and your student at coming from a place of deficit. I don't get paid enough. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough resources. I don't, to saying, well, what do I have? What do my students bring into the classroom? They bring
Mm,
wealth of experiences and wealth of, and so do I. So
right.
now we very wealthy people. Our community is wealthy versus we come from a place of deficit. And so I think maybe that's the move is shifting how we see ourselves and how we see our community and the people that we serve.
Okay. Okay. And my final inquiry for you, legacy question.
Okay.
What impact do you hope
Sheesh.
your work leaves on schools?
My impact. I think I'm still fleshing that out, but one
Okay.
thing that I would say the impact I want to be remembered for is how teachers see themselves in a system that doesn't always love them back,
Mm.
them seeing themselves as the answer, the solution to the problem or a dilemma, and then them seeing how their life, their work can shift students, can shift families, can shift society, and can shift cultures. And so how they treat their learning community has the power to shift generations by what they say and what they do. And I've known that because the legacy that I've seen that I've left from my students that I taught, they're now adults and I've run into them and now they work with me and now we hang out. And it's beyond the lessons and the content that I taught them. It's who they developed as people. And
Mm.
that's my legacy, that I was their answer, that I was their solution one point in time throughout their maturation. And now they can show up and be the answer in their lives in the world because I chose to see them differently. So I think that's the legacy, that we are all solutions to a problem or a dilemma. And we have the power to change the world just by how we show up every single day.
Wow, I love that. I love that. Well, Dr. Joyce,
Thanks.
thank you for joining me today and for helping us unpack a question that challenges all of us in education. Because the truth is, school culture and climate are not created by chance. They're shaped by the actions, expectations, and alignment of every adult in the building. And to our listeners, game changers, thank you for joining us. Here at the heart of At the Desk with Dr. KwA, we believe that transformation begins with conversation. And today's dialogue reminds us that when we take collective ownership, we create the conditions for schools to truly thrive. Until the next episode, Dr. Joyce, appreciate you pulling up a seat. And to our
Thanks
game
for
changers,
having me.
apologies for the overheating of camera dynamics, but it's all about the conversation, not the optics. I
Yes.
hope you enjoyed this episode,
Yes.
and we will see you at the desk again. Be well.
Till next time.